Hi guys, the date is March 29th, 2026, and this is a video about authenticity. And first, before we get into like some real life examples, why do we value authenticity so much? And I think it's a mix between, if you look at social media, like let's say a very common example nowadays, you can look at social media and people can alter your perception of their life. They can post them having fun on a vacation when they didn't. They can post them with a lot of friends when they don't have a lot of friends. So that's the opposite of authentic. They're altering your reality. They're altering your perception of their reality or of general reality. But then if you look at someone who is authentic, you can see, you can relate to it, you can connect with it, you can learn from it, you can create a feedback loop with it. There's so many positive things that come from authenticity, and being around someone who's authentic or something like that, just authenticity in general, that makes things so much better, because it is, when you get untapped reality, it makes it, we're all very similar, and very similar struggles, very similar problems. And when you kind of just give that to each other authentically, you can see those similarities. But what people like to do is, like, even with celebrities and that, they like to alter your perception of what you think their reality is, when in truth it's not that much different from yours. Yeah. And so when it comes to being more authentic and kind of the idea of becoming authentic, because actively being who you are is considered authenticity. But let's say you want to change something about yourself, but then you have to supposedly actively be inauthentic to build that habit, which authenticity, it comes, and just being yourself comes from habit. Because if you think about something and if you process it and try to, like, you do it from your thoughts, like, if you, it's hard to say this without people understanding the difference between thinking versus thoughts. Here, this book right here is a really good one for overthinking and that kind of stuff. But when it comes to thinking versus thoughts, thoughts come to you. Thinking is when you think about those thoughts that come to you. Authenticity is taking those thoughts that came from you and acting on them and doing whatever you do with them. But the inauthenticity can come from thinking about those thoughts and thinking and changing the result, changing your action because of what you think. Like, if the thought comes to you, I want to go up and talk to that person, then the thinking happens, oh, what if they don't like me? And that causes you to avoid them, and in turn, in a strange way, be inauthentic. And it damages yourself. You could have had a cool conversation, and it's just so that's where it kind of comes from. And then just, and the idea of not thinking about it, that is like habits. Habits are things you do over and over again without thinking about them, and that shapes, I don't want to say who you are as a person, but kind of your thoughts and then your actions. And then that affects the results, and the results affect your thoughts, and it's a whole loop. But let's say you want to change something. Let's say you're not really the kind of person to go up and talk to someone, but it just needs a little reframing. It just needs a little bit of tweaking, because you look at this, you're maybe, sorry, this is kind of a stereotype, but a bookworm. You like to read books, but you don't usually talk to people. But let's say you want to talk to people, you want to change that about yourself, but you got to look at the core of it, because if you value, let's say you want a relationship because you value connection, that is something you value as a person, and I'm gonna assume either some I'm gonna assume that that's something you've always really valued. You or maybe you've recently started valuing it, but that's still part of who you are. And who you are as a person and your values as a person is part of you. So changing an action, it may be uncomfortable. You may have to think about it a little bit, but that's how habits are developed. That's how you develop. That's how you grow as a person. And you're not being inauthentic if you're following an authentic value. The inauthenticity comes from following a value that's, not at the core authentic. Like, for example, I used to chase money. I didn't want money. I wanted to feel like I had a safety net for, let's say, going up and talking to someone. I felt like I could deal with the rejection if I had, that's okay. They don't, want to talk to me. I got $100,000. But I didn't value the money. I didn't value what the money, I guess I valued what the money could get me, but the money couldn't get me that. So that was inauthentic. And again, you have to look at what is black and white and what is not, because authenticity is never black and white. You can never just say, like I could never just say, if I have money, I can do this value, build social connection, and in return be more authentic. It's complicated, because maybe going for the money would have led to me doing that and making that social connection. And then I realize I don't need the money anymore. That's why you can't put authenticity in a box like that. But I would argue that I don't want to say easy, but it's very doable for someone being inauthentic to realize that they're being inauthentic. And it's very doable. Well, I don't want to say doable, but like as a society, we don't always show that we value authenticity, because when people are being authentic, they're showing the good and the bad, which means if someone is being inauthentic and warping your perception of reality, they look a lot better because they get to choose how they warp it. And I'm not going to say names, but that's how politically we usually end up in bad positions, because people don't have the awareness, and I'm not talking about people in particular, I'm just saying certain people, or sometimes people, lack the awareness to understand the authenticity of a person and kind of understand, look at what a person values. So we usually end up putting people into positions of power that are inauthentic, which usually becomes problematic. And over time, that translation between inauthenticity and power has just gotten so strong, because authenticity is the balance, is the uncut reality balance of good and bad, positive and negative. And it's not always that straight cut, but it includes both of them. And so we have been giving so much power to, an imbalance of power, because these people display an imbalance of, maybe good. Like they're being inauthentic, so they're showing so much good that we give them even more of an imbalance in power. They maybe shouldn't have that power. And that's where the inauthenticity leads, because it's funny how that works when you talk about balance, because of their lack of balance, now there's a lack of balance and power with them at the top end. And I think that is at the core why a lot of famous people, a lot of successful people, even rich people, you know, are unhappy, is because they are not being authentic, and they cannot live their life through habit. They cannot just, you know, say what they feel, because that would be being authentic, and it would then seem inauthentic from what they have been doing. You know, it's I think it's the core of a lot of unhappiness. But I also think that it's a very undervalued trait. But yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it for this video. It's yeah. That's the end of it.